he's going to give us a little speech. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks. I just want to thank everybody with the Stars and Stripes for putting on this event. That's I think it's another outstanding job they're doing. Can you hear me? All right, now can you hear me? Okay, I just said I think the Stars and Stripes for the event that they put on and what they've been doing here in the community and for the veterans. So let's give them a round of applause. I also would like to personally thank the honor flight people that are here today. I had the fortune of going on the honor flight out of Peoria on September the 18th, and it was a very exhausting day, but it was also a very rewarding day. So thank you, Peoria. I didn't really know what to cover today, because I know this is a mixture of veterans from the Vietnam era and everything. But I'm going to go back in my archives a little bit. This is a speech that I gave at Streator High School on November the 6th, 1986. And I think it has as much meaning today as it did back then, maybe even more so. But it was on Veterans Day. Veterans Day is the one day set aside whereby tribute is paid to those who have served their country in conflict situations since the armistice ending World War I was signed. To me, it is a day for remembrance. I remember the advice given to me by an old master sergeant when I got orders from Vietnam in 1962. He stated, "Your experience will definitely be memorable and hopefully not fatal." I remember combat operations with mountain yards. I helped train with other members of my team. I also remember some good times drinking rice wine, eating the same foods as the mountain yards consumed, such as wild plants, roots, lizards, snakes, rats, monkeys, and dogs. Now, the meal we had here today certainly was much better than that. I remember the bitterness I felt when I returned to the United States in 1963, and no one knew nor cared where I had been, nor about my friends who had been wounded or killed. Even my family didn't understand. I harbored this feeling of bitterness for 23 years, until I started working with other Vietnam vets here in Streator to construct the Streator Vietnam Memorial. This was a group that I could relate to. Someone who has shared similar experiences and could understand how I felt. I occasionally still have nightmares or, using the more modern terminology, flashbacks. Now you have to remember this was 1986, so since that time I've gotten over those. But like the old Sarge said, the experience for me was memorable and not fatal, but it was for Captain Harry D. Kramer of the 14th Special Forces, who was killed in Vietnam on October 21st of 1957. This death toll continued through 58,000 other American men and women before the Saigon evacuation in 1975. I remember daily those listed as missing in action, some of whom I believe are still being held against their will in Southeast Asia. Again, time has lapsed that probably that is no longer true. To summarize, my Veterans Day thoughts would be the phrase which was the impetus behind moving a group of Vietnam vets to build a Streator Vietnam Memorial. You fought for a cause that no one understood, and as your brothers, we understand, and we'll never forget the price you paid in the name of freedom. vets here today know that there are levels of family. Your spouse, children, and grandchildren, the family of everyone who wore the uniform and served honorably, those who have a common bond of experiencing combat, and a really close brotherhood of those who shared the same space during combat. All of us here today fall in one or more of these categories. Thanks to Carrie, Lori, and all the Stars and Stripes Committee for having us here today. And I'd like to close with a little poem that I wrote. And I titled it PTSD Morning Shade. As I look in the mirror, I am startled at the young stranger looking at me. How can it be that I haven't aged over the past 5 or 6 decades? Was I really that young, intelligent, eager to free the world from oppression, superbly trained, one of America's best, with silver wings upon my chest? I looked again, and the youth was gone. Once again, reality sets in. Now an old man stares back at me. His eyes tell a story of someone who has seen too much and experienced events that a young man should never be exposed to. Less willing now to believe anything his government tells him. Look more closely, the signs are there. He exudes pride for his service and love for his country. Tougher and wiser now, but openly sheds tears for lost brothers. Don't mess with him. You are safe. He is still one of America's best.
Thank you, Jimmy. Next on our agenda is the Peoria Honor Flight. They're going to come up here and speak a little bit about what they do.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to say to the Stars and Stripers, thank you so very much for inviting the Peoria Honor Flight to attend this event. It's a true honor to be here. I will tell you right up front, we've had the honor of signing up several veterans for the Honor Flight. We thank you for your attendance, and we thank all military personnel for their service. Thank you. I want to tell you just a little bit about Honor Flight, in case you're not aware. Let me ask a question. How many here have gone on an honor flight? Few hands. How many here are going on the honor flight next Tuesday? A couple hands out there. And how many of you have signed up for the honor flight and have not yet gone? You're on the list. When it's your turn, you'll be notified. That's about all I can tell you about that. A little history of Honor Flight. It started in 2005. The first flight was in 2005. The World War II Memorial was dedicated in 2004, which is just short of 70 years after the end of World War II. The original intent of Honor Flight was to fly World War II veterans out to see the memorial, because if you think 70 years after the war, and a veteran at the end of the war might have been 20, they were into their 90s. So the objective back then was to get these veterans out there to see their memorial while they were still able. Since that time, that was in 05, we're now 13 years later, we've expanded that to where we fly World War II veterans. They are our first priority. Our second priority is Korean, because we're losing them quickly also, and then into the Vietnam era. Veterans are chosen by the time that they serve, and also within those ranks, anyone who has medical conditions that can be life-threatening are moved up the list. So if any of you have signed up and your medical condition has changed since you signed up, please get in touch with us so we can update that record and help you get moved up the list. We are flying our 4th flight this year. This is the first year that we've had 4 flights. Other years we've had 3 flights. This is our 5th year in existence. Each flight carries 70 to 75 veterans. And with each veteran, there's a person called a guardian. It's either someone that the veteran selects to go with them as a guardian, or we have a long, long list of people that have volunteered to be guardians for those who have not selected an individual. If you think about it, if we have a World War II veteran flying today, he's very old, he or she is very old, and their need for that guardian can be very much required. During the day, we'll walk 3 to 5 miles, and therefore, if a veteran cannot walk that much, we do provide wheelchairs free of charge, and obviously we require that that guardian be able to walk that amount of mileage and to be able to push the wheelchair during that time frame. So therefore, we have some limitations of who can go and who cannot go as guardians. If you haven't signed up yet, you will not be called if you're not on the list. If you get on the list and you were called and you change your mind and you don't want to go, at that time you say, no, thank you, but we can't get you there if you're not on the list. The flight we have next Tuesday, we are flying 3 World War II veterans. We are flying 5 Korean veterans, and the rest are Vietnam. The oldest veteran that we've flown out of Peoria was 103 years old. So if you are of their age, don't worry about it. On one flight, we had 2 brothers. One was 101, and his younger brother was 93. So we are out there actively seeking World War II Korean veterans and Vietnam veterans. We want you to get on the list. As I tell people, stop by the table. We have a list of Vietnam veterans as well. But if you're not on that list, you will never get called. So we encourage you to get signed up today, or if not today, to go to our website, which is www.greaterpeoriahonorflight.org. You can sign up online, get your application in. If there is a specific guardian that you would like to have go with you, you can reference that guardian, have them fill out an application, and then you'll be paired up to go. If there's another veteran that you would like to go with you, on your application you can list that veteran's name, and then we'll pair the 2 of you up so you go on the same flight. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a fantastic program. My wife and I have been involved with it since 2013. Oh, and I apologize, I didn't introduce. My name is Gene Wallace. My wife over here, Eileen Wallace, and then also we have, way in the back there, Bob Reed. We have all been involved with Greater Peoria Honor Flight since they began in 2014. We have all been on flights as guardians. Bob and I have been on flights as bus captains and in other positions. We give a lot of time to the program, and I will tell you, I don't think I could find a better program to devote my time to. It is very, very honorable and very wonderful. We are a 501c3 charitable organization. We raise money through fundraisers or looking for charitable contributions. We have no political or government affiliation whatsoever. I would encourage all of you veterans, please stop by our table or go to the website, sign up, and get on the list. None of us are getting any younger. So we want to get on that list and be ready to go when our name is called. We'll be happy to talk to you here at the table. Again, I thank you very, very much for the invitation. I'd like to get as many of you signed up as possible. Those will be going on the flight on Tuesday. I too will be on the flight. I will see you Tuesday. And I hope to see all of you on the flight at some point in time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Peoria Honor Flight. There's a lot of information I didn't even know. Our next speaker is Colonel Colonel Steve Cooper, retired member of the Illinois National Guard.
Like she said, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm a retired Army chaplain. I spent time in the active Army, and I was in the Illinois Army National Guard 3 times, the North Dakota National Guard twice, and I deployed with the New York National Guard. First thing I want to say is to all the Vietnam veterans in this room is welcome home. That's a half a century late, but welcome home. We, the veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq, we owe you big time. The wars in which we participated in were also very, very unpopular. The wars that we participated in, Afghanistan and Iraq, were also raised a whole lot of anger as well as the war that you participated in. But the American public did not take their anger out on us. When we came home, we were treated quite well. We were treated as heroes. A large part of that is due to you, the Vietnam vets. Thank you for ensuring that we were received in a manner much better than many of you were received. I thank you for that. Once again, welcome home and thank you for your service. There's a group of your brothers in Rockford, Vietnam vets, that helped me greatly in my recovery from my return from my tour of duty in Iraq. I grew up viewing Vietnam vets as heroes. Upon my return from Iraq, the Vietnam Veterans Honor Society of Rockford looked me in the eye, welcomed me, adopted me as their chaplain, and looked me in the eye and called me brother. For them to look me in the eye and call me brother, that was key in my recovery. That meant more to me than they could possibly imagine. Matter of fact, I just spent Thursday morning with that same group. The VFW magazine a couple years ago compared the Afghanistan and Iraq wars combined and compared it with Vietnam. Afghanistan and Iraq so far has been 8 years longer, but not near as many casualties. In Vietnam, there was more than 47,000 hostile deaths. Iraq and Afghanistan, that number is almost 5,400. In Vietnam, there was nearly 11,000 non-hostile deaths. Iraq and Afghanistan, that's almost 1,500. In Vietnam, there was more than 153,000 wounded. Iraq and Afghanistan, a little more than 52,000. 12 years of fighting in Vietnam versus two decades and counting of Afghan and Iraq. Vietnam, we lost 9 times as many troops to hostile deaths, 7 times as many to non-hostile deaths, and 3 times as many wounded. Our nation truly owes you, your generation, a debt of gratitude. A debt that is of immeasurable proportion. As I said, I was an Army chaplain. I'm still a pastor and missionary. I refer to God's Word on a regular basis. Sacred Scripture teaches, no greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Now, I realize that Jesus was speaking of his own mission on the cross, but in that same vein, we need to honor the brothers and sisters who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to lay down their lives for us. I am here representing the Illinois National Guard. There was a National Guard unit from Illinois deployed to Vietnam. I'm going to read a couple of things that was given to me. On May 13th, 1968, the 126th Service and Supply Company out of Quincy, Illinois, reported for induction to federal service to Vietnam. The unit was assigned to the 23rd Supply and Transportation Battalion of the Armacal Division. Convoys trucking fuel came under enemy fire and mined roads. PFC Larry Baxter earned a Silver Star posthumously for his role in bravely navigating his fuel truck through enemy fire to provide an escape route for the rest of his convoy. Then in part of a news release. On September 19, roughly 129 members of the 126th landed in Chu Lai, Vietnam, where they were assigned to the 23rd Supply and Transportation Battalion, Americal Division. Their first few days in country gave them a taste of things to come. Heavy shelling greeted them on the first night, made even worse by the fact that they had not even been issued weapons to return fire. 126 was deployed to Vietnam for almost a year and served with great distinction, earning praise and decorations for their efforts. 3 National Guardsmen were awarded the Bronze Star for their heroism defending the supply convoys. On August 16, 1969, when the 126 soldiers returned, they came home to a hero's welcome in Quincy. It's good to know that not everybody was treated shamefully upon their return. I want to let you know what your Illinois National Guard is currently engaged in. We have approximately 100 Illinois Army National Guard soldiers and 100 Illinois Air National Guard airmen deployed. 3 Illinois Army National Guard units have recently returned home from the Middle East. And before Christmas, 3 Illinois Army National Guard units will be deployed, will be mobilized to the Horn of Africa, to Iraq, and to Afghanistan. And of course, we're here to honor you, the Vietnam vets. But I would be remiss if I didn't honor your families and loved ones as well. I've been on both sides of that equation. I deployed in 2004 to a pretty intense area of Iraq. We were in the heart of the Sunni Triangle. We were shelled just about every day. Towards the end of my tour, I saw a stat that the longest we went the whole time I was there was 48 hours without being shelled. Of course, we were in an area that was about the size of a small town, and the bad guy wasn't very good at it, but still, we were shelled about every day. As difficult as my tour was in Iraq, my son's tour in Afghanistan was even worse. He's 11 Bravo, he's infantry, he was kicking indoors, and he saw stuff like many of you saw in Vietnam. He lost several of his buddies. He lost his LT. Matter of fact, one time I didn't know if I was his dad or his chaplain. He was home for his R&R. 15 days he was given, and I found out that one of his, I didn't know it was one of his buddies, was KIA. I asked him, hey Caleb, do you know Specialist so-and-so? He goes, yes, Dad, it's the guy on your computer. That's the guy right next to me, and in the picture. And I informed him that his buddy was KIA. Like a typical soldier, typical Marine, instead of saying, man, I'm glad I wasn't there, he felt he should have been there for his buddies. Matter of fact, the guy that was in Caleb's seat got hurt in that same incident. And like I said, at that point, I didn't know if I was his dad or his chaplain. I was telling that story to our chief of staff when I was still in the Illinois Guard. I was telling that story to our chief of staff's administrative assistant, and I got to the part where, Kelly, I didn't know if I was his dad or his chaplain. I heard this booming voice coming out of the chief of staff's office. You're his dad, chaplain. Roger that, sir. I'm his dad. I can't speak for anyone else. I cannot speak for anyone else. I can only speak for myself. But for me, having experienced both ends of the equation, to be the loved one back home was much, much more difficult. Things I had knowledge of for a decade. I was a chaplain. I had briefed countless wives and moms and dads and friends and girlfriends on things to think, things not to think when your loved one's in harm's way. Things to do, things not to do when your loved one's in harm's way. Things I knew had knowledge of for a decade, I suddenly had hard knowledge of, that it was my loved one that was in harm's way. And then think of my poor wife. She did it twice. She sent her husband off to war, and then 6 years later sent her baby off to war. Again, I cannot speak for anyone else, but for me, being the loved one back home was much more difficult. And I wanted to make sure that we honored your loved ones and your families as well. I do thank you for allowing me to spend a few moments with you this afternoon, and I appreciate it. And again, welcome home. Thank you for your service.